There's something comical about how they played with you. Like a child dangling a spider over a fire, laughing at its panic, convinced it wouldn't bite back. They saw your patience as weakness, your loyalty as leverage. They pressed buttons just to see what broke, not realizing you weren't built to shatter. You were built to observe. Every insult, every manipulation, every casual cruelty. They stacked it like cards in a house they thought you'd never collapse. But you saw it. You studied it. You let them believe they were winning. Because part of the lesson is letting the fool dance before the silence drowns the music. They thought it was a game, so you let them play. You smiled, nodded, took notes. And while they were laughing, you were becoming a mirror. One that would soon reflect everything they never wanted to see. You knew it from the beginning. The way they treated you wasn't ignorance, it was entitlement. They believed they had access to your grace without earning it. They believed kindness was a contract, not a choice. So they chipped away, piece by piece, testing how far they could push. The way people often do, with what they think they own. But that was their mistake. They thought the game had rules. They thought you'd stay in bounds, keep score, wait your turn. What they didn't realize is that you weren't even playing. You were learning, calculating, recalibrating your threshold. And when the silence came, when your eyes stopped pleading and started staring through them, they didn't hear a door close. They heard the floor drop beneath them. Every mockery, every manipulation, every carefully placed jab they disguised as humor. It was all a confession, not about you, but about them. Their need to diminish, their need to control, their need to test love without offering it. That wasn't a game. It was a pattern, a sickness. And like all sicknesses, it needed exposure. You didn't punish them. You revealed them. You became the lesson no one forgets because it arrives quietly and leaves a scar. You didn't raise your voice. You raised the standard. And that, more than any outburst, shook their core. Because people can dismiss anger, but they cannot ignore the silence of someone who's done explaining why they deserve respect. You weren't cruel. You were precise. You didn't retaliate. You reframed the entire conversation. You stepped out of the ring and let them shadowbox their illusions. Let them swing at a ghost, thinking the target hadn't moved. But you had. You had walked into another dimension. One where your worth wasn't on trial. One where your identity wasn't constructed by their comfort. And from that place, you became unplayable, untouchable. The board flipped, the pieces burned. And suddenly, the ones who loved the game stood in the ashes of it, wondering where the player went. But the truth was, you were never playing. You were preparing the lesson. It's always amusing how the joker becomes the judge, how the one they thought would bend forever becomes the one who redraws the map. That's the transformation they never anticipate. Because manipulators aren't strategic. They're habitual. They rely on repetition, not reinvention. So when you finally stopped reacting, when you refused to dance to their chaos, the air shifted. They called you distant, cold, changed. But it wasn't coldness. It was clarity. And clarity feels like cruelty to those who benefit from your confusion. You weren't becoming mean. You were becoming real. No more sugar-coated explanations. No more softening your truth to protect their insecurities. Just silence, boundaries, and the echo of a lesson they swore they didn't need. You ever notice how people beg for another chance only after you take yours back? That's the brilliance of the lesson. You never have to announce it. They learn it through absence, through nights spent rewinding old conversations, looking for the moment you switched. But there was no switch. There was only accumulation of every disrespect, every red flag they laughed at, every sigh you swallowed. You became a storm not because of one act, but because of 1,000 ignored warnings. And now that you've gone quiet, they're finally listening. But it's too late. Because the lesson was never about getting them to change. It was about reminding yourself that you never needed to be a part of the game to begin with. Freedom doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes it arrives in the form of stillness. When you wake up one day and realize you're done begging to be understood by people who are addicted to misunderstanding you. That's when the chains fall. Not with noise, but with a click so soft, only you can hear it. And in that silence, something feral returns to you. Something ancient. The version of you that doesn't ask for seats at tables you built. The version of you that doesn't perform dignity for spectators who only clap when it benefits them. That version doesn't play. That version teaches. And every boundary it sets is a chapter in the book of becoming untouchable. They will remember you. Not for how much you gave, but for how sharply you stopped. For how your exit wasn't loud, but seismic. They'll look for you in crowds they never invited you into. They'll mimic the parts of you they once mocked, hoping it makes someone else stay. But it won't, because they never learned presence. They only learned possession. And possession never survives when the soul of what it holds decides to evolve. You weren't lost. You were graduating. And their heartbreak? That's just the final exam. The moment they realize you weren't a chapter, they were a footnote, a lesson embedded in a story they'll never have the pen to finish. This is your turning point, the part where you stop seeking closure and start crafting legend. The point where you understand that revenge isn't about making them hurt. It's about showing the world what they missed. Not by talking, but by becoming. Evolving so ruthlessly that the past starts to look like a lie. You don't owe explanations. You don't owe softness. You owe yourself transformation so complete that anyone who thought they knew you has to introduce themselves all over again. And this time, they'll be more careful. This time, they'll speak softly, not because they respect you, but because your silence taught them what your words never could. You saw it before the rest. The subtle flick of their tone, the rhythm of their manipulation disguised as charm, the rehearsed laughs, the carefully timed apologies, the oh-so-convenient forgetfulness. You watched them move like puppeteers, believing they were the smartest in the room. They thought no one was watching closely. No one was connecting the dots. But you were. You took notes while they boasted. You watched every mask slip when they believed no one was paying attention. You saw the cracks in their performance. And with every crack, you grew quieter, colder, more calculating. That's the curse of the perceptive. You bleed from truths others never have the courage to notice. But it's also your weapon. Because the one who sees through the game becomes the one who rewrites its conclusion. They were playing checkers while you mapped chessboard patterns in your mind. While they celebrated short-term wins, you were already studying the endgame. You understood something they never did. Most games are lost in the silence between moves, the space where your next action isn't loud, but strategic. They baited you, expecting an immediate reaction. But you gave them patience, precision. You responded with silence so sharp it bled them from the inside. Because what shakes the deceiver more than confrontation is indifference. They didn't expect you to disengage. They expected protest, pleading. But you walked off the board, and in doing so, you made them irrelevant. You flipped their game over, not in anger, but in elegance. And now, with the pieces scattered on the floor, they stare, trying to understand where it went wrong. But it was never a move they made. It was the moment you stopped playing. You become dangerous the moment you detach, the moment you stop trying to convince them of your worth, because that's when their entire framework collapses. Their game depended on your investment, on your reactions, your attempts, your willingness to stay. Once you saw the strings, you became immune to the performance. You saw the patterns in their flattery, the tricks in their guilt trips. You caught the rhythm and rewrote the tempo. And in doing so, you claimed authorship over the outcome. Because no one can beat a player who no longer plays by the rules. You start making your own. You create silence where noise used to live. And in that silence, they hear their own manipulation echoing back. You don't need revenge. You don't need spectacle. You just need clarity and the discipline to hold it. They always think the game ends when you leave, but that's not true. The game ends when you stop caring, when your emotions no longer orbit their gravity. That's when the collapse begins, because their game was never self-sustaining. It required your energy to keep spinning. And now, with no reaction to harvest, no attention to manipulate, they spiral. You watch, detached, as they try old tricks that no longer land, as they test new personas in hopes of pulling you back. But you already burned the script. You already buried the board. And there's no encore coming. You see them clearly now, not as powerful, but as pitiful, predictable, a collection of tactics masquerading as personality. And you're no longer a participant. You've become the final page, the one that closes the book on the performance they mistook for power. They'll accuse you of being cold, of being cruel. But that's just noise, just the outcry of players who lost control of the game they created. Because in their minds, you were never meant to see through it. You were meant to stay predictable, to keep reacting, to keep chasing clarity from those who weaponized confusion. But you chose detachment. You chose silence. You chose to walk away from the table and take the rule book with you. And now they're scrambling, desperate to reconstruct the control they once had. But it's too late. You've already dismantled the board. You've already whispered to yourself a new truth. They only had power when you played along. The moment you understand the architecture of the game, you understand where to place the final blow. It doesn't require volume. It requires vision. You learned that ending the game isn't about confrontation. It's about extraction. Removing yourself without ceremony. Refusing to give them the audience they crave. Letting them sit in the silence you leave behind. Forced to face the truth without your presence there to soften the impact. That's how you take control. Not by dominating, but by disengaging. Not by fighting, but by refusing to be baited. You let them destroy themselves with the absence of your participation. Because without you, their game has no meaning. Without you, their strategies become echoes. And you become legend. You didn't seek control. You claimed autonomy. There's a difference. One requires domination. The other requires awareness. And awareness is what allowed you to rewrite the rules they once thought unbreakable. They built the game on the assumption you'd never look up. But you did. You saw the hands behind the curtain, the motives behind the charm, and you acted accordingly, with detachment, with finality. You didn't need to announce your exit. You just stopped showing up. And in that act, you taught a lesson that no conversation ever could. You can't manipulate someone who's no longer willing to sit at your table. You can't control someone who doesn't need your approval to exist. You'll notice something strange in the aftermath. Their laughter softens. Their confidence trembles. Because now they know. They know the game was never real. That all their victories were shallow. That their control was paper thin. You exposed it without touching them. You pulled back the curtain without raising your voice. And now the silence between you speaks volumes. They revisit every move, looking for the mistake. But the mistake was thinking you'd never evolve. The mistake was believing you were playing the same game they were. And now, with the rules rewritten and the board dismantled, They face the one outcome they never prepared for: irrelevance. The one they underestimated became the one who dictated the ending. You don't destroy them by screaming louder. You don't win by burning the bridge and standing in the smoke. Destruction is what they expect. It's what they crave. It keeps you in the ring, keeps the attention on them, keeps the wound open so they can feel important in your pain. But you're not here to give them that satisfaction. You're not here to wage war on a battlefield they chose. You're here to vanish from their reach, to grow so far beyond the limits they assigned you that even their whispers can't follow. That's transcendence. That's revenge sharpened with elegance. Not a sword to the throat, but a mirror held to their decay. And what do they see? That you didn't just survive them. You erased their relevance in your evolution. You leave them behind, not by erasing them, but by becoming someone they could never harm again. That's the sting they don't recover from. You rise while they stay in the same cycle, playing the same tired tricks on new victims, hoping to relive a power that was never real to begin with. But you've stepped out of that loop. You've severed the need to explain, to justify, to beg them to understand. You no longer scream your truth, you embody it. And your existence, now out of reach, becomes the echo of their failure. Because what can they do to someone who doesn't flinch anymore? What power remains when the puppet cuts its strings and builds a throne? You didn't become a monster. You became untouchable. And that, more than any fire you could have set, is what burns them. They fed on your reaction. Every glare, every tear, every pause, they filed it away like trophies. It validated their delusion, that they had control, that they mattered. But now they're screaming into silence, throwing punches at a ghost. And you're far above, watching with cold amusement. Because the air is different up here, where you no longer respond, you no longer explain, you no longer acknowledge their attempts. You outgrew the need to retaliate. You outgrew the very game they swore you'd always play. And that's when they panic. Not because you attacked, but because you vanished from the arena entirely. You took the spotlight with you. You let them sit in their own darkness. They hate that they can't reach you anymore, that your success has no space for their voice. They see you glowing, not with vengeance, but with detachment. And that detachment is what cuts deepest, because nothing feels more like failure to them than your indifference. You're not watching them. You're not competing. You're not referencing them in your story. And that void, they weren't ready for it. They thought they'd haunt you. They thought they'd be your villain. But you gave them no role. You wrote them out of the script. You transcended their plot line, and now they're just a footnote in your prologue. That's how you win. Not by returning fire, but by removing their name from your breath entirely. You evolved, and in doing so, you made them irrelevant. And irrelevance is the only fate a manipulator fears. They don't mind being hated. They don't even mind being exposed. But to be forgotten, to no longer have emotional weight, that breaks them in a way no confrontation ever could. You're not punishing them, you're replacing them. Replacing the space they once occupied with peace, with growth, with people who understand the language of loyalty without distortion. And they watch, helpless, as you bloom in the aftermath. Their old power, now a joke. Their shadow, now too small to follow. You taught them that real loss doesn't happen when you fight. It happens when you no longer care to. You moved on in silence, and that silence became thunder. Every success you built in their absence is a reminder that they were never necessary. Every boundary you enforced without yelling became law. And while they try to spark drama, to bait you back into their chaos, you remain distant. Not because you fear them, but because you've evolved past the frequency of noise. You vibrate higher now, and from that elevation, Their words lose meaning. Their games lose structure. You see them, yes, but not as threats, as relics. Artifacts of a past self you buried the day you stopped giving your pain a stage. The revenge they never expected was your serenity. They will try to redefine you, call you cold, call you ungrateful. But those are the words of the powerless, the ones who failed to break you and now scramble to minimize what they can't access. But your detachment is not bitterness. It is the final transformation. You no longer correct their lies. You let them drown in their versions of the truth, knowing full well the truth needs no defense from those who already walked away. Your silence becomes sacred. Your presence becomes exclusive. You decide who gets access, who gets your time, who gets the privilege of knowing the healed version of you, the one that doesn't explain scars, the one that no longer wears pain as an identity. You gave them more than they deserved, and still, they wanted your dignity. But you reclaimed it, not through confrontation, but through elevation. You stopped being a character in their performance and became the director of your own. The show changed, the stage changed, you changed, and the contrast now sears through them like sunlight through rot, because they can no longer reach the version of you they once wounded. You made sure of that. You sealed the door not with locks, but with growth. You became unreachable by walking so far forward. They can't even see your silhouette anymore. You didn't destroy them. You simply became impossible to access. That's the apex of revenge. You stopped meeting them at their level, and that became the final blow. Not because you were better, but because you chose better. You saw the loop they spun, the web they weaved, and instead of tearing it down in a dramatic exit, you simply walked around it. You let them call it a trap while you built wings. And now, as they sit surrounded by the same old games, the same tired manipulations, they feel it. The absence of your chaos, the silence of your validation. Your presence once gave them significance. Now, your absence leaves them irrelevant. That's the slow death of the ego, realizing that the one they tried to cage built a world without doors, a world they are not invited into, a world where your name is no longer tied to their narrative. They measured power by control, by how much they could trigger you, how many steps you'd take just to reach their approval. But you learned something deeper. Real power is how still you can remain while being misunderstood. It's the self-respect to walk away without needing closure. It's the discipline to not correct their version of the story, because you no longer need to be right in their eyes. Your revenge came in restraint, in the way you withheld your presence, in how you smiled while removing every tether. You didn't lose them, you released them. And while they grasp at straws, trying to pull you back into their storm, you've already found calm on the other side. They think they still matter, but they're shouting into a past you no longer inhabit. The moment you stopped showing them your pain, you stripped them of their illusion. Their identity thrived on your suffering.